again, learning the terminology and learning what Revit can do for you, as far as when you're or how to translate your current workflows is really important and key to implementation of Revit. And one thing about workflows, and here I've seen in my current experience some successful workflows for firms that are considering Revit, using what they call pilot projects. Nothing that's on a deadline or nothing that's going to cost, contracts or whatever. It's something that you guys can develop in-house for your teams to work on to kind of develop your standards and templates prior to getting into a real project. Some of those projects should be small, maybe simple, non-complex projects. It doesn't necessarily have to be small, but it could be, 20,000, 50,000 square feet. But if it's a box, that's better than, the Guggenheim. Existing or legacy projects, that's another way of taking Revit and starting out from, not starting from scratch. Basically take the design or the guessing game out of the design. Use a project that you already have in AutoCAD or PDFs of, and use those projects to start in Revit. You can use them as underlays or go-bys in a Revit model, and trace and copy and use it to create a 3D model. And what that'll do is that will give you the ability to document all of your questions and all of your issues, where Revit is just not conforming with your standard, the standard that you've been using for 25 years. You can basically go through a basic simple project to get to hash all that out prior to doing a project that's on a deadline. A lot of firms try to take this Revit, 2 feet jumping in head first, right? But the successful projects that I've seen out there for firms that are just implementing are what we call the hybrid workflow, using a little bit of CAD or document images or PDFs that some firms have already that are a part of this project. They can use that in Revit, not reinvent the wheel from your AutoCAD projects. And there's, again, a lot of workflows to make that happen. Take on a phased approach and use a combination of the above workflows to complete the transition. One other thing about this Revit journey that you guys might be experiencing are basically roadblocks, is what I call roadblocks, or it's just communication failures. And most of you guys are used to, like me back when I was in the industry, I would come in, put my headphones on, had a stack of markups, I'd turn on my music, and I was just what we call cranking and banking, right? Just drawing whatever I had on, on the table. One thing that I didn't do was a lot of asking questions to my coworkers until I got into an office that had like a bullpen type layout, and I could ask the guy or the girl next to me, hey, how did you do this? How did you do that? In Revit, it's really going to be important for you guys to open the lines of communication, because once you do that, that's really going to make everybody understand. A lot of people don't want to show you where they are with the software or in their knowledge, so they kind of just keep their mouth shut and not ask, and just kind of do what they need to do to make it work. But if you have an open dialogue with the team that's transitioning into this software, especially for like a pilot team or a pilot project, they really can do a solid for your company to kind of help implement Revit or bring it up to date using your current workflows, what you've learned in Revit, and kind of merging them together in that process. There's a lot of rumors out there about Revit and how it's harder than AutoCAD. It doesn't do this or it doesn't do that, and that's not true. It does everything that AutoCAD can do and then some. Now, does it take longer than AutoCAD? That's really the question, and that's the key, right? And sometimes it is, but sometimes it doesn't. And where it doesn't is when you've prepared for it. And what I mean by that is that if it's a simple, isometric or schematic, right? And you're sitting there saying, man, it's taking me an hour in Revit. Your answer was to do it in AutoCAD, bring it into a drafting view in Revit, slap it into the project, meet the deadline, and then, document what your questions were and why you couldn't get that detail or that, that schematic to work. Then on the next project, that would have already been answered and taken care of, right? So always make sure that you document what you can. Some things are going to take longer in the beginning, but after 3 or 4 projects, when you develop a really strong template, a lot of the stuff that you've taken, that you've done in CAD is pretty much already done for you. And so the tasks that do take a little bit longer in Revit than in CAD, it makes up for it in other things. So there's a lot of give and take. And this is, again, where it's every firm is different. There's not one firm that's the same. Firms that I work with that have 5 offices swear up and down that they're all standard. And when I've gone to visit each firm, they're all a little bit different. Make sure that the standards or SOPs are followed and you know, documented, well documented. You know, a lot of compromising with graphics early on. You might have to compromise because Revit doesn't look exactly the same, but it conveys the exact same information. You know, that's okay for the first 2 or 3 projects. Once the 3rd project is done, that would have already been addressed probably early on. So there's little things that you can just continue on with because the information's there, and then other things that are just absolutely necessary to modify. But that's where a good solid team comes into play, like a development team, a mentoring and a support team like Applied Software. Some firms I have that I work with don't purge or don't clean up their models. And the reason why is because of all their standards and everything that's in there. But if they had a really strong template, what you should be able to do is purge the working models and then take your templates and transfer in back all the information that's necessary or that's standard. So there's some procedures, again, that are just being ignored in the industry, and I get them on a daily basis through tech support, as well as the ignoring your hardware and software. That's really, you know, for most companies, they invest all this money into the software, but the hardware and the management of both are non-existent. So, you know, we're here to help, and we do support and we do updates on a daily basis. But, you know, most of you guys should be able to or have a team in-house that does this, right? And that stuff should all be taken care of in the background. And we'll talk about those a little bit later. Another suggestion that I tell everyone in my training is to document everything in your transition into Revit. And what I mean by that is that, you know, if you document all of your questions and, you know, your issues and, you know, concerns with this, with your, you know, in your journey to the transitioning from AutoCAD to Revit, that information is valuable for the next project and for any new hires or anybody coming into the team, you know, because you'll be able to answer a lot of those questions that new people will come in that will have, or you'll be able to at least identify issues or gaps in your workflows that could be addressed. Some things that we do are like virtual suggestion box, you know, Survey Monkeys, or keeping a Word doc on the server so you can put your questions. I keep a Word doc with questions and lists, to-do lists and things like that that you guys should do. You should keep a running list Word doc of my Revit questions, and those things can really help throughout the first 2 or 3 projects, really solidify a template in the long run. And then, of course, you know, report any kind of issues, fix it, document it, and repeat. Always document, right? That's the real key here.